Right now, as you watch this, two superpowers are locked in a battle that will determine everything about your future. Where you work, what you buy, whether you'll see war in your lifetime. For 50 years, America and China were partners. They've built the modern world together, your smartphone, your laptop, the global economy and everything, but that world is ending. What comes next? Nobody knows. This is the story of the most important relationship on planet Earth. How it started, how it flourished, and how it's falling apart right before our eyes. This is USA versus China, the new Cold War. To understand where we are, we need to go back, way back. October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong stands in Tiananmen Square and declares, "The Chinese people have stood up." After centuries of humiliation, colonization, invasion, civil war, China was finally united under communist rule. But there was a problem. The world was divided. On one side, America and its capitalist allies. On the other, the Soviet Union and its communist bloc in China. China chose the Soviets. The Korean War. Chinese and American soldiers killed each other by the thousands. The relationship, frozen, hostile, dangerous. For 2 decades, America and China barely spoke. China was closed off from the world. Mao launched radical experiments. The Great Leap Forward. The Cultural Revolution. Millions died from famine and persecution. By 1970, China was isolated, impoverished, and paranoid. America saw China as an enemy, a communist threat spreading across Asia. But then, everything changed. And because of one man and one very clever idea. Richard Nixon, President of the United States, anti-communist crusader, and yet, he was about to do the unthinkable. Here's what Nixon understood. America's real enemy wasn't China. It was the Soviet Union. And guess what? China hated the Soviets too. By 1969, Chinese and Soviet troops were fighting on their border. Communist brothers had become bitter enemies, and Nixon saw an opportunity. Enter Henry Kissinger, Nixon's advisor. In July 1971, he took a secret trip to Beijing. His mission: open the door to China. The Chinese leader, Mao Zedong, was intrigued. If China allied with America, the Soviets would be surrounded. With strategic genius. The ancient proverb says, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." February 21st, 1972. The moment that changed history. Nixon stepped off Air Force One in Beijing. Premier Zhou Enlai extended his hand, and with that handshake, 23 years of hostility ended. For a week, Nixon toured China. He walked the Great Wall. He dined with Mao. He toasted to friendship. The message was clear. America and China were no longer enemies. The world was stunned. How could capitalist America embrace communist China? But Nixon understood realpolitik. Sometimes you need to work with your adversary to defeat a greater threat. Through the 1970s, the relationship grew. Chinese students came to American universities. Small trade deals were signed. Cultural exchanges began. It was slow, cautious, but it was progress. Then came Deng Xiaoping, the man who would transform China forever. In 1979, Deng visited America. He wore a cowboy hat in Texas. He toured Boeing factories. He watched an NBA game. And he learned. Deng returned to China with a radical vision. He famously said, "To get rich is glorious, and it doesn't matter if a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice." What did he mean? Simple. Forget communist ideology. Focus on economic growth. Use whatever works. Deng opened special economic zones in coastal cities. He invited foreign investment. He began transforming China from a communist backwater into a capitalist powerhouse with communist political control. American companies started investing. McDonald's, Coca-Cola, small at first, but it was beginning. The seed was planted. And then, June 4th, 1989, Tiananmen Square. Students demanded democracy, freedom of speech, political reform. For weeks they occupied Beijing's central square. The world watched. Hope was in the air. The Communist Party responded with tanks and bullets. Hundreds, possibly thousands, were killed. The massacre was broadcast worldwide. America was outraged. Sanctions were imposed. The relationship froze. Many thought this was the end of US-China cooperation, but not for long. Because American businesses had tasted something in China, something irresistible: cheap labor, a massive market, and enormous profit potential. The pull of money proved stronger than the push of principles. The 1990s arrived. The Soviet Union had collapsed. The Cold War was over. America was the sole superpower. And everyone believed in one thing: globalization. The idea was beautiful. Connect the world through trade. Make everyone economically interdependent. And peace would follow. Because countries that trade together don't go to war with each other. Right. This was the promise. This was the dream. President Bill Clinton championed this vision. He pushed for China to join the World Trade Organization. Many in Congress resisted. They asked, should we reward China after Tiananmen Square? Will this cost American jobs? Are we empowering a potential enemy? Clinton's argument was persuasive. If we bring China into the global economy, they'll have to follow international rules. They'll liberalize. They'll become democratic. Free markets create free people. Trade will transform China. It was called engagement, the policy of integrating China into the Western-led order with the belief it would eventually democratize. December 11, 2001, China joins the World Trade Organization. The floodgates opened. What happened next was the fastest economic transformation in human history. In 1990, China's GDP was $360 billion. By 2000, it hit $1.2 trillion. By 2010, $6 trillion. By 2020, nearly $15 trillion. Think about that. In just 30 years, China went from a poor agricultural society to the world's second-largest economy. American companies raced to China. Why? Simple economics. A factory worker in China earned $2 per hour. A worker in America earned $20 per hour. The math was irresistible. Apple made iPhones there. Nike made shoes there. Walmart filled its shelves with Chinese goods. General Motors sold more cars in China than in America. Every major American corporation set up operations in China. American consumers benefited enormously. TVs got cheaper. Clothes got cheaper. Electronics got cheaper. Your entire cost of living decreased because of Chinese manufacturing. Corporate profits soared. Shareholders got rich. The stock market boomed. Globalization seemed to be working. But there was another side to this story, a darker side. American factories closed. Millions of manufacturing jobs disappeared. Entire towns hollowed out. The Rust Belt, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, once the industrial heart of America, became symbols of decay and despair. The politicians said, don't worry, you'll get new jobs in the service economy. We're moving to a knowledge-based economy, where a factory worker making $25 an hour with benefits and a pension doesn't even want to flip burgers for $10 an hour with no benefits. Communities that had built their identity around manufacturing for generations watched their way of life disappear. Suicide rates increased. Drug addiction skyrocketed. Anger grew. America was splitting. Coastal elites and educated professionals thrived in the new global economy. Working-class communities in the heartland suffered. Meanwhile, China was getting rich, very rich, and very confident. Cities like Shanghai and Shenzhen transformed almost overnight. Skyscrapers rose. Infrastructure projects that would take America decades were completed in years. High-speed rail networks, massive airports, smart cities. The Chinese middle class exploded in 1990. Virtually no Chinese were middle class. By 2020, over 400 million Chinese had joined the middle class, the largest and fastest expansion of prosperity in human history. Chinese students flooded American universities. They studied engineering, computer science, business. They learned, they absorbed knowledge, and many returned home to build Chinese companies. For 2 decades it seemed to be working. America got cheap goods. China got rich. Both sides benefited. But beneath the surface, problems were brewing. Big problems. The Dragon Awakens 2001 to 2016. While America was distracted fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, spending trillions of dollars and thousands of lives in the Middle East, China was focused on one thing, becoming a superpower, the global financial crisis. America's economy collapsed, banks failed, unemployment soared. The entire Western economic model seemed broken. China, they barely flinched. Their economy kept growing, and Chinese leaders drew a conclusion: the American system is failing. Our system works better. This was the turning point. China's confidence transformed into ambition. In 2012, Xi Jinping became China's leader, and everything changed. Previous Chinese leaders had followed Deng Xiaoping's advice: hide your strength, bide your time, be patient, don't challenge America directly, keep your head down. Xi rejected this approach. He had a different vision: the Chinese dream, making China the world's dominant power by 2049, the 100th anniversary of communist rule. Xi's plan had several elements. First, economic dominance. China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion infrastructure project across 70 countries, building ports, roads, railways from Asia to Europe to Africa, creating a Chinese-centered economic world. Second, military modernization. China began the largest military buildup since World War II. New aircraft carriers, stealth fighters, hypersonic missiles, cyber warfare capabilities. Within years, China had the world's largest navy by number of ships. Third, technological supremacy. China poured hundreds of billions into artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 5G networks, semiconductors, biotechnology. The goal: dominate the technologies of the future. Fourth, control at home. She crushed dissent, arrested human rights lawyers, put 1 million Uyghur Muslims in detention camps in Xinjiang, destroyed democracy in Hong Kong, erected the world's most sophisticated surveillance state with facial recognition cameras everywhere, and fifth, challenged American dominance. China began asserting territorial claims in the South China Sea. They built artificial islands on reefs and militarized them with missiles and airstrips. When an international court ruled against China's claims, China simply ignored the ruling. American officials watched all this with growing alarm. But here's the problem. American companies were making too much money in China to rock the boat. Wall Street didn't want tension. Silicon Valley didn't want restrictions. Corporate America wanted access to Chinese markets. So for years, American politicians issued warnings, but took little action. Meanwhile, China was playing a different game, a longer game. China wasn't just competing economically, they were stealing massively. Chinese hackers broke into American companies and stole trade secrets worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Fighter jet designs, semiconductor technology, pharmaceutical research, everything. China forced American companies operating in China to hand over technology as the price of market access. Want to sell in China? Share your technology with a Chinese partner, who would then copy it and become your competitor. China subsidized their own companies with billions in government support, allowing them to undercut American competitors and dominate global markets. The American government estimated that Chinese intellectual property theft costs the U.S. economy between $225 to $600 billion per year every year. This wasn't free trade. This was systematic economic warfare. American politicians began to wake up. Both Democrats and Republicans started agreeing on one thing. China was not becoming a responsible stakeholder in the international system. China was becoming a strategic competitor, a threat. President Obama tried to respond. He announced a pivot to Asia, refocusing American military and diplomatic attention on containing China's rise. He negotiated the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a massive trade deal that excluded China, designed to create an economic bloc to counter Chinese influence. But Obama's approach was cautious, measured, diplomatic, and then came 2016 and everything exploded. November 2016. Donald Trump wins the presidency with a clear message. China's ripping us off, and it's going to stop. Trump had been talking about China for decades. He saw the trade relationship as fundamentally unfair. China exported to America freely while restricting American access to Chinese markets. The trade deficit was enormous. America was buying $500 billion more from China than China bought from America. Trump promised to change this, to fight back, to make America win again. Many dismissed this as campaign rhetoric. They were wrong. March 2018, President Trump fires the first shot. He imposes $50 billion in tariffs on Chinese goods. The reason: punishment for intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. China immediately retaliates with tariffs on American goods, targeting products from states that voted for Trump. Soybeans from Iowa, bourbon from Kentucky. Sending a political message. Trump escalates. Another $200 billion in tariffs. China hits back harder. Trump goes further. He threatens tariffs on virtually all Chinese imports. Over $500 billion worth the trade war was on. Stock markets around the world panicked. Supply chains disrupted. Companies didn't know what to expect next. American farmers suffered badly. China stopped buying American soybeans, corn, pork. Farmers who had supported Trump watched their incomes collapse. Trump had to send them billions in emergency aid. Chinese manufacturers slowed down. Workers lost jobs. Economic growth slowed. Economists called it a lose-lose situation. Both countries were hurting themselves. But Trump saw it differently. He believed America had more leverage because China needed the American market more than America needed Chinese manufacturing. He was willing to endure short-term pain for long-term gain. The tariffs remained. Even Biden later kept most of them in place. But the trade war was just the beginning. The real battle was over something else: technology. In 2019, Trump banned Huawei, China's biggest telecommunications company, from American networks. He pressured allies to do the same. Why? Because Huawei was leading the world in 5G technology, the next generation of wireless networks. And 5G isn't just about faster phones, it's about autonomous vehicles, smart cities, the Internet of Things. Whoever controls 5G infrastructure controls the digital future. American intelligence agencies warned that Huawei equipment could be used by the Chinese government for espionage, to spy on communications, to steal data, to shut down networks during a conflict. Huawei denied this. China called it economic warfare, but the damage was done. Trump also moved against TikTok, the wildly popular Chinese social media app used by millions of Americans. He tried to ban it or force its sale to an American company. The concern: TikTok collected massive amounts of data on American users, and that data could be accessed by the Chinese government. The message was clear: America would no longer allow Chinese companies access to sensitive sectors of the American economy. China responded with its own tech nationalism. They launched a campaign for self-sufficiency in semiconductors, the computer chips that power everything from phones to missiles. China spent hundreds of billions trying to build their own advanced chip industry to reduce dependence on American technology. Both countries were decoupling, separating their economies and technology sectors. And then, January 2020, COVID-19. The virus emerged in Wuhan, China. Within months it spread worldwide, killing millions and shutting down the global economy. The pandemic's origins remain disputed. Was it natural transmission from animals? Was it a laboratory accident? China refused to allow a thorough independent investigation. They suppressed early warnings. They withheld data. American anger at China intensified. Trump called it the China virus. Relations hit their lowest point since 1972, and the pandemic revealed something crucial: America's dangerous dependence on China. When the virus hit, America realized that most of its medical supplies, masks, gloves, medicines were made in China. When China stopped exporting, American hospitals faced shortages. This wasn't just about trade anymore, it was about national security. By the end of Trump's presidency, the relationship had fundamentally transformed. The era of engagement was over. The era of strategic competition had begun, and this competition would only intensify. January 2021, Joe Biden becomes president. Many expected him to ease tensions with China. They were wrong. Biden kept Trump's tariffs. He kept the restrictions on Huawei. He kept the tough stance. But Biden's strategy was different. Where Trump had confronted China largely alone, alienating many American allies in the process, Biden focused on building alliances to counter China collectively. Biden revived old alliances and created new ones. The Quad: America, Japan, India, Australia meeting regularly to coordinate Indo-Pacific strategy. UK, US, America, Britain, Australia, sharing nuclear submarine technology to counter China's naval dominance. Strengthening NATO and emphasizing that China, not just Russia, was now a concern for European security. Bringing South Korea, Philippines, and other Asian nations into closer security cooperation. The strategy: surround China with a network of aligned democracies. Make it clear that challenging the existing order meant confronting not just America, but the entire developed world. Biden also focused on something Trump had largely ignored: human rights. Biden sanctioned Chinese officials over the treatment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, which the US government called genocide. He spoke out on Hong Kong. He made values part of the competition. But the most dramatic escalation came in August 22. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, visited Taiwan, the highest-ranking American official to visit the island in 25 years. China was furious. They saw this as America supporting Taiwanese independence, crossing a red line. China's military response was unprecedented. They launched missiles over Taiwan. They conducted massive military exercises surrounding the island. They essentially rehearsed a blockade. The message was clear: Taiwan is ours, and we're prepared to take it by force if necessary. Taiwan, let's talk about Taiwan, because this island of 24 million people might be the most dangerous flashpoint on Earth. Taiwan is a democracy. It has its own government, military, currency, but China considers Taiwan a breakaway province that must be reunified with the mainland, by force if necessary. America has a policy of strategic ambiguity. We don't explicitly promise to defend Taiwan, but we don't rule it out either. We sell Taiwan billions in weapons. We conduct naval patrols near Taiwan. The implication is clear: if China attacks, America might intervene. Why does America care so much about a small island thousands of miles away? 3 reasons. First, strategic. Taiwan sits in the middle of crucial sea lanes. If China controls Taiwan, they control shipping routes through which trillions of dollars of trade flows. Second, credibility. If America abandons Taiwan, every ally in Asia, Japan, South Korea, Philippines will question American reliability. The entire alliance system could collapse. Third, semiconductors. Taiwan produces 90% of the world's most advanced computer chips through TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. These chips power everything: your phone, your car, military systems, AI. Lose Taiwan, lose the digital age. This is why Taiwan matters. This is why it's so dangerous. Xi Jinping has made clear that reunification with Taiwan is a core goal. He wants it accomplished, preferably by 2049, the centennial of communist rule. But maybe sooner. China has been building up military capabilities specifically to take Taiwan: amphibious assault ships, air superiority fighters, missile forces to keep American carriers away. American military analysts wargame this scenario constantly. The conclusion: a war over Taiwan would be catastrophic. Thousands of deaths, economic devastation, possible nuclear escalation, and yet, both sides keep preparing for it. Meanwhile, the technology war intensified. October 2022, the Biden administration announced the most sweeping technology restrictions yet. America banned the export of advanced semiconductors and chip-making equipment to China. This wasn't just about a few products. This was an attempt to prevent China from achieving technological parity with the West in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced military systems. The logic: advanced AI requires advanced chips. If we deny China access to those chips, we slow their AI development, which is crucial for both economic and military applications. China called this technological terrorism. They accused America of trying to sabotage China's development, and they responded. China restricted exports of rare earth minerals critical to Western manufacturing. They investigated American companies operating in China. They made clear it can play this game. The world was splitting into two technology spheres: American technology and Chinese technology. Increasingly separate. Companies faced impossible choices: do business in China or America, but not both. Choose your market. In 2023 and 2024, tensions continued escalating. Chinese spy balloons flew over America. America shot them down. China conducted more military drills around Taiwan. America announced billions more in military aid to Taiwan. China banned iPhones in government offices. America investigated Chinese-made cranes in American ports as security threats. China restricted data access for foreign companies. Back and forth, tit for tat, action and reaction. The rhetoric hardened. Biden called Xi a dictator. She talked about reunification with Taiwan and standing up to bullying. By 2024, polls showed Americans viewed China as the greatest threat to the United States. In China, nationalism surged, with widespread belief that America was trying to prevent China's rightful rise. The economic relationship continued, because complete separation is impossible when your economies are so intertwined. But the trust was gone. The friendship was over. Both countries were preparing for what comes next. And that brings us to today. To now, to the question everyone's asking: what happens next? We're living through a historic transformation. The relationship that defined the last 50 years is breaking apart, and nobody knows what comes next, but we can identify possible scenarios. 3. Paths forward. Scenario 1. The THAW in this scenario. Pragmatism prevails over nationalism. China's economy, already slowing, faces serious problems: a real estate crisis, massive debt, declining population, youth unemployment. These internal pressures force Chinese leaders to prioritize economic stability over geopolitical ambition. America realizes that complete decoupling is impossible and counterproductive, that climate change, pandemics, and other global challenges require cooperation. Both sides step back from the brink. They establish rules of competition. They maintain economic ties while competing strategically. They manage tensions without letting them explode into conflict. Think of it like the US-Soviet relationship after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Still rivals, but with guardrails. Still competing, but avoiding catastrophe. This is the optimistic scenario. Both sides find a modus vivendi, a way to coexist despite fundamental differences. Probability, maybe 20%. Possible, but requires wise leadership on both sides and a shared recognition that conflict serves neither's interests. Scenario 2. The long cold WIR. This is what we have now, but continuing for decades. America and China remain locked in strategic competition across every domain: economic, technological, military, ideological. They continue decoupling their economies gradually. Supply chains reorganize. The world splits into an American-led sphere and a Chinese-led sphere. Countries are forced to choose sides. Technology becomes fully bifurcated. There's a Western internet and a Chinese internet. Western AI and Chinese AI. Western standards and Chinese standards. Military tensions remain high, with frequent close calls and incidents. But both sides avoid direct war because the costs are too high. This scenario looks like the original Cold War. Decades of tension, proxy conflicts, ideological competition, arms races, but no direct superpower war. It's stable in the sense that neither side crosses the final red line. But it's expansive, dangerous, and means living with constant tension. Probability maybe 60%. This feels like the path we're on. Neither side wants war, but neither side trusts the other enough for real peace. Scenario 3. The CIO and FLCT. This is the nightmare scenario. A crisis over Taiwan. Maybe China attempts a blockade. Maybe Taiwan moves toward formal independence. Maybe there's a miscalculation, an accident, a misunderstood signal. Suddenly, shooting starts. American and Chinese forces engage. The world's two largest economies, two nuclear powers, are at war. Even if it stays conventional, even if no nukes are used, the consequences are catastrophic. Global trade collapses. Supply chains shatter. Your phone, your car, your medicines, everything that depends on international trade becomes scarce. Energy prices explode. Food prices explode. Inflation hits levels not seen since the 1970s. Stock markets crash worldwide. Retirement savings evaporate. Unemployment soars. And that's if it stays limited. If it escalates, if nuclear weapons are used, we're talking about the end of civilization as we know it. Probability, maybe 20%, hopefully low but not zero. History shows that great power competition often ends in great power war. The question is whether we're smart enough to avoid repeating that history. So where does this leave us? What does this mean for your life? Here's what you need to understand. This isn't just geopolitics happening far away. This rivalry touches everything. Your job might depend on trade with China. Your retirement savings are invested in companies with Chinese exposure. Your phone is made with Chinese components. Your future career prospects depend on which country leads in AI and technology. If you're young, this competition will define your entire adult life. The decisions being made in Washington and Beijing right now will shape your economic opportunities, your security, maybe whether you serve in a military conflict. This matters enormously. For 50 years, America and China built the modern world together. American technology and capital combined with Chinese manufacturing and labor created the prosperity we've enjoyed. Your smartphone exists because of this partnership. So does the affordable everything you buy at Walmart or Amazon. But that era is ending. We're entering a new age. An age of competition, not cooperation. An age where the world might split into rival camps. The optimists say competition is healthy, that it will drive innovation, that both countries will be forced to be better versions of themselves. The pessimists say we're sleepwalking toward catastrophe, that great power competition historically ends in great power war, that we're repeating the mistakes that led to World War I. Who's right? We don't know yet. History is still being written. But here's what we do know. The choices made in the next few years will determine whether this century sees cooperation or conflict, prosperity or poverty, peace or war. The US-China relationship isn't just the most important bilateral relationship in the world. It's the most important factor in determining what kind of world you're going to live in. That's why this matters. That's why you should pay attention. That's why understanding this relationship is understanding your future. Because whether you realize it or not, you're living through one of the great historical turning points. The end of one era, the beginning of another, and nobody knows how it ends.